Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today I have my March reading wrap up for you, and let's just jump right on into it. So I read 18 books in the month of March, and I definitely started out the month of March feeling like I was deep in a reading slump and I was trying to get out of it. And at the end of March, I felt like it was gone and I was living my best reading life, which was wonderful. So genre breakdown is I had 1 mystery, 1 general fiction, 8 historical romance, 8 contemporary romance. I include dark, mafia, whatever is contemporary, I put under the umbrella of contemporary romance because I just don't read enough to break it out any further. So 16 of the books that I read were audiobooks, 2 of them were ebooks, 2 of them were rereads, and 3 of them were arcs. So now here's the star rating breakdown. I had 7 5 stars, 6 4 stars, 5 3 stars, and no DNFs, surprisingly. So that's wonderful. Okay. So, the first book that I read was And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. This is a classic mystery. This was my first Agatha Christie. My husband is a huge mystery fan, and he knew I was feeling slumpy, and he suggested that I read this to see if I could figure it out. I became obsessed with this story. I thought that it was so gripping and compelling. There were parts of this book that genuinely had me creeped out and had that sense of like primal fear. Somebody was hunting you. It was a good time. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was fantastic. It's a classic for a reason. This is basically a plot where 10 people are sent to this island. They think they're going there to like get wealthy or have some great prize or something. But really, they've all been sent there because they are guilty of a crime that sort of went uncaught. And when they arrive there, each of them ends up getting killed off one after the other. So you're trying to figure out which of these 10 people is the killer. It was fabulous. It was so good. I really had a great time reading it. It is a very old book. It was written, I believe, in like 1932 or something like that. I have it in my reading vlog that I talked about this. And it does have racism in there. It does have sexism in there. Overall, though, the mystery that was being told was completely gripping, and I freaking loved it. So 5 stars for that. Thank you, husband. The next book that I read was a reread, and it was Wicked and the Wallflower by Sarah MacLean. This is one of my favorite historical romances of all time. It's one of my favorite Sarah MacLean's, and I adored this book just as much as I did the first time that I read it, and that made me so happy. This book is sort of a very vague Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and it has definite visual cues and vibes of Peaky Blinders. The heroine Felicity is a spinster. She is sort of in a spot where she needs to marry to save her family from financial ruin. The hero is one of the bare-knuckle bastards who rules Covent Garden. He's basically like king of the crime underbelly over there. And he ends up seeing her and wanting to secure her as the wife for the Duke that he has a past with, and he hopes to really ruin that Duke. But of course he ends up falling in love with Felicity. I love this romance so much. It is so deeply compelling. The hero gives off so many strong touch her and I'll kill you vibes. Like, it was fantastic. There is a literal line in here where he goes absolutely feral when someone touches her hair when she goes to visit him in Covent Garden. I loved it so much. I think this book is perfection. I dearly, dearly love it, and I think this would be a great read for someone looking to get started in historical romance who typically reads contemporary. So, loved it. So happy. Okay, the next book that I read is Ever After Always by Chloe Leese. I gave this book 5 stars. I dearly loved this. This was a fantastic read. This is a second chance romance, and this has great anxiety rep in here. I adored this couple. They're in their marriage, and they're definitely struggling, largely because of the hero's anxiety and a lack of communication that is happening because of that. And I love the Bergman family. I didn't love the first book, but this book worked for me so, so well. I adored it. One of my new all-time favorites. I loved watching this couple really struggle. I love that. I love when couples have to struggle to get their happily ever after. Struggle and fight to reignite that love that they had and work through the issues that they had. I just felt like this was extremely realistic in a very hopeful, compelling, romantic way. And I just freaking adored it. I thought it was fantastic. 5 stars. Okay, now the next 3 books are actually in a trilogy, so I'm going to talk about all of them together. The first one is One is a Promise, the second one is Two is a Lie, and the third one is Three is a War. So this is a trilogy, and it is a love triangle, a true love triangle where she only ends up with one of these men at the end. And also that I'm grouping all of these together because this is very much a cliffhanger at the end of each book. You don't know what's happening with the couple. There's no resolution. You have to read all 3 books to get that resolution and happily ever after. I was very satisfied with how they ended up, who she ended up with. I liked that a lot. This series, however, was definitely lacking in what I love about Pam Godwin. It didn't really go to that darkest level of the abyss where the couple got, and then they had to epically climb out of that together. That's a hallmark of Pam's work that I really, really love. This one was much lighter. It did have some darker elements, some like dubious consent that she typically has in some of her romances towards the end, but the first book doesn't feel dark at all. The first book is mostly setting the stage for our heroine, and she believes her love, I believe it was her fiance, is dead, and so she's trying to move on with her life. She ends up meeting this guy who is a complete grump and working for him as a dancer, and they fall in love towards the end of the book, and then, oh wait, here comes fiance back into the picture, and so the next 2 books are her and these 2 men trying to figure out how they're going to go on in this life after this mess that they've got each other in. So I did really like this. The first book I gave 4 stars. It was really good. I thought this series has potential. This is gonna wow me. However, I felt like the series went downhill from there, and books 2 and 3 were both 3-star reads for me. I didn't hate it by any means. It was entertaining, like I couldn't stop listening to it, but it wasn't satisfying in the way that I wanted it to be, and I don't believe that has anything to do with the fact that this was a love triangle, because unpopular opinion, I like those. I like the drama of a love triangle. Okay, I do. But it felt like it was lacking that extra layer of depth that I know Pam Godwin can do, so I was slightly disappointed. But it was still an enjoyable read, but having read more of her books that I consider to be like her best stuff, like the Deliver series and Dark Notes and Sea of Ruin, this one just didn't quite hit the mark for me, but it was still an entertaining series. Okay, now the next book is The Savage by Sophie Lark. This is the 4th book in the Kingmaker series, but I do feel like you could read this as a standalone. Now, I read this book as an ARC. I'm on Sophie's ARC team, and I loved it. I was captivated. I was gripped by this story. I didn't necessarily feel a ton of emotion for the romance. That was actually the part I was least invested in, which I feel like a lot of people have complained about. But the thing that constantly captivates me about Sophie's works is how she works in all these different background details in the world and in the plot and how that affects her couple's relationships. I think it's really, really fascinating. I think she has a great grasp on building characters. I think she creates plots that are very intriguing, that are unexpected, and not necessarily in a way that's like, oh, that's a twist I didn't see coming, but unexpected in a way how the character handles that situation. I always find that very, very fascinating with her books. I go in there thinking I know how this character is going to behave, and then the character behaves in a way I did not expect, but in a way that still remains true to that character, and I think that is just masterful writing, honestly. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was a thrill ride. It gave me a lot of Breaking Bad meets Mr. and Mrs. Smith. It was just a good time, and I enjoyed it personally. I know a lot of people don't agree, but I had a really good time reading this, and I just thought it was a fun time, so 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I read is Carnal Urges. This is the 2nd book in this Mafia series by J.T. Geisinger? I don't know. This book was a ton of fun. I gave this book 4 stars. I see the hype. I really, really loved the heroine. She was the shining star in this book. She had such great wit, comedy, confidence. I loved her backstory, the things she had struggled with, and how that contributed to her relationship with the hero. I just adored her. I thought she was a fantastic character. I also really liked the hero in this. He was extremely protective, very, very, very smitten with the heroine right from the get-go. They had a ton of chemistry that I dearly loved. This book was very spicy, very steamy, very good in that way. But the thing that kind of kept this from being a 5-star for me was largely that once they had consummated their relationship physically, all of that great tension and sparks just evaporated, and I felt like the hero went from lust to love a little too quick for me. I feel like that's something this author does, is she leans in pretty hard to insta-love, and I just don't feel like the way that she does that works for me on a satisfying level. I do see how people love this, but it was just not quite a 5-star for me, but I still had a really great time reading it. Okay, the next book that I read was another mafia romance, and it is Reaper by A. Zavarelli. This is the second book in this series. I also gave this book 4 stars. Really enjoyed this. This book actually is pretty dark. It has a lot of death and sexual assault trauma that goes in here. The heroine is working as a stripper. She's trying to help her mother who is dying of cancer. The hero is basically born and raised to be an assassin and a killer, and he is a very dangerous man. He is sort of the type of guy that doesn't necessarily not believe he can love, but he avoids like emotional connection and emotional relationships. However, he is fixated on the heroine. And this book really had a lot of sort of what I call like kitchen sink drama. Like, it just sort of gave these characters so many tragedies in their lives that there were so many that it sort of made it hard for me to suspend my disbelief in that way. I would have loved this so much more if they had just not had so much trauma in their lives. But the second half of this book really won me over. I really loved their romance. This couple worked for me on a lot of levels, and I really did enjoy this. I gave it 4 stars. Okay, the next book that I read is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey, and I did not love this book. I gave this book 3 stars. This book was fun. It had a lot of fun contemporary romance vibes that were very swoony. I really liked the hero in this. I liked how he was a widower who was struggling with, trying to move on from his wife's passing. But honestly, and I just could not get on board with the heroine. I just really, really struggle when the central focus of the plot is on a very rich, privileged girl who is mommy and daddy are trying to teach her a lesson and get her some hard knocks in life. Like, I just really struggled with her. I found her, not that I need to relate to every heroine, but I do, not that I need to like be similar to relate to them, right? But I do feel like there was nothing about this heroine that really made me root for her or really endeared her to me at all. I felt like she was pretty fake and surface level and almost like a stereotypical heroine that is a very rich, privileged mommy and daddy support her. So she was really the stumbling block for me in this book. I just could not be bothered to care about her, and because of that, I found myself not invested at all in their romance, and I didn't like her, but I also feel like because of that, I just didn't feel like there was anything special about this romance. It was just very much average and just okay, and I just didn't love it, and I'm sorry, so 3 stars. Okay, the next book that I read is The Proposal by Mary Bellog. This is a historical romance. I read this for our book club I do with Jen from the Book Refuge called the Rake Appreciation Society. This was very good. I really loved this. I also gave this book 4 stars. This is about a hero who has a lot of trauma from serving in the war, and the heroine who also has an injury type of thing she is working through, and they end up sort of thrown together, and very, very, very gradually they end up falling for one another, and I really, really loved watching the hero's very slow descent into love for this heroine, almost against his wishes. I thought that was very entertaining. I love Mary Bellog. I thought this was fantastic, and I definitely want to continue on in the series, so 4 stars. Okay, the next book that I read was another reread, and it is Watership Down by Richard Adams. This is a classic novel of a group of rabbits told from their point of view who are leaving their doomed warren because one of them has visions of destruction coming to the warren, and they travel out into the countryside in England to find a new home, and they have adventures, and there's a lot of mayhem, and there is a rival warren that is basically like a, what's the word? Like a totalitarian type of I can't think of the word right now, but like the leader of that warren is like extremely militant, keeps them under control, and they have wars. And I am explaining this so badly, but this book is absolutely compelling. I loved it just as much as I did when I read it when I was 14. This is not a children's book. It's just a general fiction book, but most people read it when they're kids, but I feel like you gain a lot of it reading it as an adult. It really helped me to see how humans interact with the natural world, and it had a great sense of empathy for other living things, and I just was fascinated in these bunnies' stories and the plots that they made and how they just struggled to survive, and it was fantastic. 5 stars. Okay, the next book that I read is How to Be a Wallflower by Eloisa James. This was an ARC that I received, and I really, really enjoyed this. I gave this book 4 stars. This was so fun and so heartwarming. It just was a complete joy to read from first page to last page. One of the things I love about Eloisa James is just her wit and her charm and how tight and perfect her writing is, honestly. If you need some good writing, like, you have to read Eloisa James if you haven't. Like, her writing just feels like a breath of fresh air. It's just so eloquently, and not in a way that is flowery. Like, she's just an excellent writer and an excellent storyteller. So the basic plot of this is we have an American hero who has come to England to find a costumer to bring back to his chain of theaters that he is starting to get going to make a fortune there. And the heroine is the heiress of basically like a toilet fortune, and she is a very savvy businesswoman, and she is looking at also securing this costume maker's shop, and so they have this sort of rival business happening there. It was charming, it was delightful, it was lighthearted, it was steamy. I just really, really loved this. There honestly isn't really anything I could criticize about this other than a lack of just missing that something that sparked me and just like made me like, wow, that was a 5-star read, you know? So I really enjoyed this, and I think if you're looking for a really fun, witty, bantery, rugged American hero type of historical, I would definitely recommend this. So 4 stars for this one. Okay, and the next book that I read is If the Duke Demands by Anna Harrington. This book was a little disappointing for me. I was really hoping to love this. I really enjoy Anna's writing. It had a great opening scene with our heroine sort of at a masked ball, setting up the stage to have one night of passion with this man that she has a crush on. In he walks, she believes, only to discover once they start getting hot and heavy that it is not the man she thought he was, it's his brother. So, had a great intro. I thought it was going to be very fabulous and compelling, and it was. The writing was good. I was really into the story, but I was left feeling disappointed in the end because I just felt like their relationship was purely driven by physical attraction, and there was little else that compelled them to really want to be with the other person, and I just personally don't love books like that. It felt very surface level, very basic. It was fun, but it was not memorable, and it wasn't anything that is really gonna stick with me or would be something that I think back on a lot. So 3 stars for this one. However, the next book that I read is The Duke by Kerrigan Byrne, and I absolutely loved this. I gave this book 6 stars, one of the few books I have given 6 stars this year. I tell you what, when I need good writing, and I want something that is going to be very gritty and have a lot of emotion and a lot of insight into thought processes of our characters, I go to Kerrigan Byrne. I think that she's fantastic. There's just something about her words that I find unputdownable. This hero is extremely complex, very, very tortured, goes through his life with chronic pain, and because of everything that he's gone through, he definitely comes across as a jerk, to put it mildly. But I found myself really connecting with his character and feeling a lot of empathy and sympathy for him and being very invested in him finding and reclaiming his lost love with the heroine who he met years and years before. I loved this book. It was deeply compelling. It was deeply emotional. It was sexy. It was steamy. It was very intriguing with a great murder mystery background plot. I just loved everything about it, and I will never forget it. 6 stars. Okay, and the next book that I read is The Marquess Makes His Move by Diana Quincy. This was also an ARC. This is her new historical romance, which just barely came out, and this is also going to be our Rake Appreciation Society book for May. So I'm going to keep my review kind of short, but I did give this book 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. I loved the setup. We have our heroine who is a merchant's wife, and she is actually secretly the one who is the driving force in their business. She's a map maker, but everyone believes it's her husband. And the hero is actually a marquess who is in disguise going to her household to try and get hired as a footman so he can find out this mystery of who is like stealing his land, basically. And he believes that he doesn't know it's her who's the map maker. He believes the key is in this map maker's house. So they end up meeting there, and like, no lie, I absolutely adore this trope of like a difference of class where the hero is like a servant type of character and the heroine is maybe the lady. Like, I just eat that up for lunch. I adore it. I thought it was great. I loved their romance. I loved the chemistry. I loved the plot. I thought this was very intriguing and very interesting. The heroine and the hero are both Middle Eastern. They have some descent in there, so there was great diversity in that. But something was lacking about 75% of the way through. This started to lose steam for me, and so I ended up giving it 4 stars, but I still remain a fan of this author. I think her work is great, and I look forward to her next book. Okay, and the last book that I read in the month of March is The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. This is a sapphic female-female romance. It's a historical romance. I freaking loved this book. It was beautiful. It was romantic. It was swoony. It was deeply emotional. I just adored every freaking page of this. The basic plot of this is one of our heroines is a widow, and she was the wife of a man who was extremely well thought of in the scientific community. He was an astronomer. He was always looking for this new discovery. Like, he was very well regarded, and he was extremely demeaning and emotionally and mentally abusive to his wife. And so because of that, she has zero confidence. She doesn't think that she's worthwhile, and she's very wary of trusting another person. The other heroine is younger. She is the daughter of a man who recently passed away, who also had made great advances in the scientific community. They meet together because the widow asks the younger heroine to come, well, actually she asks her father, not knowing that he had passed away, to come and translate this astronomy text. And the young woman decides to go without letting her know and just shows up, and they have an instant connection, instant sparks. Their relationship was a thing of beauty. I loved seeing them find their happiness together. I loved every moment when they were together. It was just beautiful, deeply romantic, deeply thought-provoking, and so many, just a short little book. It was beautiful. One of my favorite female-female romances I've ever read. One of my favorite historical romances I've ever read. I just couldn't get enough of this couple. This definitely had a slower moving pace. Like, there wasn't a lot of angst in their relationship until towards the end. There wasn't really a ton of stuff happening with the plot, but it was just a very introspective book into how these two characters thought about love, what they had gone through in the past, and how they were going to work towards finding happiness together, and I loved it. So, all right, there you go. There is my March wrap-up. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to leave me a green heart emoji, and I'll see y'all in my next video.